The new HD6 is Ibis's first purpose-built enduro race bike. Enduro is a discipline where you need to be able to pedal up grueling uphill stages to then get to gnarly, technical, fast descents, which you race down against the clock. So essentially, this is a bike that needs to be able to do everything well. To test that out, we've brought Logan's brand new downhill bike, a specialized demo, up here to Whistler Bike Park, a world-renowned location for aggressive downhill trails. And we're gonna compare it back to back. Then tomorrow, we're gonna take it out to some normal mountain bike trails here in the Whistler Valley and compare it against a Ripmo, which is for many people their do-it-all bike, to see if this new HD6 can really do it all and maybe be your next single bike. Wonderful. Thanks for joining us. Zacharias, why don't you introduce yourself real quick?
So my name is Zacharias Johansson from Sweden, and I'm part of the Ibis Enduro racing team. Been with the team for quite a while, ridden all of the bikes, and racing on the World Cup circuit.
Colin, obviously you have been very involved in this process. What has your role been with this bike?
I am engineering manager at Ibis. I've been doing projects for Ibis for 15 years now, so I actually finished the original HD and then did the HDR and the HD3 and then the Ripmos, along with a bunch of other stuff. But the HD6 was my project. I was the one who's the lead engineer on this.
Wonderful.
Working on it for 2.5 years now.
This mean-looking machine is the new Ibis HD6, a purpose-built enduro race rig that has 165 millimeters of DW-Link rear suspension, a 180 mil fork, a mullet wheel setup, and a 64-degree head angle. Now this razzle-dazzle colorway before me here is a pre-production color that has been underneath the Ibis Enduro team all season. You may have seen it on Pink Bike. It will be available to you in our custom bike builder in Lavender Haze, Emerald Forest, and Traffic Cone.
The one thing that I get from Zaka is that it needs to be more progressive. So we made this one very progressive, designed for coils and about as progressive as it can be.
It seems like the intent of this bike is to essentially be like a enduro race bike. Is that an appropriate categorization of this bike as you see it?
Yes, that was the main focus, to make a bike for the team that was capable of where enduro racing was going. You know, a couple of years ago, it started getting much gnarlier and they needed a bigger bike. Mm-hmm. And so this bike was the answer to that.
Like, who all is involved in that process and figuring out what that vision is going to look like?
Well, it's feedback that I've got from the team over the years. Zaka for sure, Robin on the geometry, just things that they've asked for, things that they've been doing to their Ripmos to make them race machines. All that feedback was worked into this bike.
Okay, so this piece of trail, pretty slow, not super steep, but like really rooty and really rocky, kind of similar to like a lot of riding in Bellingham. There's just roots everywhere. So I feel pretty comfortable riding it on, a single crown bike. It's nice to be able to like put the bike where you want it and kind of like move around if you need to. Let's go ride on the downhill bike and see how it compares, see if the extra travel helps me out. Okay, Logan's downhill bike. Now, there's something about a dual crown fork, just the stanchion coming through with this upper crown. It is just stiffer, even over a Fox 38, which is what that has, a 180 mil Fox 38. But aside from that, like, I'm not using all the travel here. I definitely wasn't using all the travel there. I was probably using a pretty similar amount of travel. And with double down tires on the HD6, this has downhill tires, I think that provides a lot of the like comfort you feel pushing through chunky stuff. So right now I'm thinking it's a wash. I'd ride the HD6 on this any day. All right, so on that rock shelf up there, you may have seen the back wheel get pushed up into my butt. I didn't hit it quite right and like maneuver the bike just right, which makes me really glad to have a 27.5-inch wheel on this bike. When you're pushing a trail bike as hard as you can, things get pretty bucky, and even with 165, 180 mil fork, you're getting bucked around. So the smaller wheel in the back makes a difference, whereas the big wheel up front helps smooth out the bumps. Zacharias, how has that played out for you and in terms of the feel of the bike and how it handles and stuff like that, using a mullet setup?
Really liking the mullet. We raced the bike for the first 3 EDR World Cups this year. The smaller wheel is just making the bike really nimble, and what I feel as well is when the terrain gets steeper, you stand more in the bike than instead of top of the bike. With the new suspension as well, the progression is there to actually charge as hard as you want, but then the sensitivity up top as well actually gives you such good traction that on the traction side and stuff, I can't really feel the difference if it would have been a 29er wheel or not. But just having that small wheel in the back, just we talked about a bit before, how the courses change and stuff, it's mostly super fast, and then you have the big wheel up front to give you the confidence to charge. But then most of our corners aren't nice burbs, it's janky, tight, weird corners, and the small wheel really helps you maneuver the bike easier with less effort through those corners.
Came through here, charged through this sort of beeline, and it all felt good. I was able to push through all these roots and stuff. I stayed on my line. Maybe a hair faster on the downhill bike, but this thing felt pretty good throughout and made me stoked on the 27.5-inch wheel. Okay, so this was a bit of trail that I spent a good bit of time looking at as I pushed up to figure out what my line was, and I felt like it was very undulating. There's roots everywhere, and I felt like I was able to pop and push the HD6 a lot better than the demo. There was a part where I kind of just pulled off that kind of steeper bit with roots, and was just whatever, don't care where I land, and just pushed it through a bunch of roots. But this one I was able to I feel get my line that I'd looked at a little bit better and wound up there, and then was able to push through and pump down this stuff and generate more speed with the bike.
I said you have that sensitivity in the beginning to really give you traction and stuff, but then it progresses up. So even if you have a lot of travel, the bike doesn't feel dead or sluggish. If you want to pump something, or the bike still accelerates really good, even though it's a long travel bike.
One area that I've always felt downhill bikes excelled was pulling for silly gaps that you would never normally try. So I wanted to find one like that maybe I wouldn't do on a normal trail bike and see what it felt like. So I pulled from that rock back there and landed kind of essentially on these rocks, maybe hopefully a little to the left or hopefully kind of in the middle, but basically I'm not good enough to really be that precise. So basically on these rocks. And in this case, on this trail bike with double down tires, big, long travel trail bike, I felt like it was about the same. I just pulled and landed in the middle of it all and was on my way, which is a pretty cool feeling. It's why I've always loved downhill bikes. It's really why downhill bikes got me into mountain biking, and it's pretty cool that you can do the same type of thing on a trail bike now. There is a little more travel, obviously, on a downhill bike, but at the end of the day, I had the same amount of confidence pulling for this particular gap, which is pretty neat.
We basically decided that too many people were trying to squeeze onto the large. And so we broke that size up a little bit. And the large, which is now the size 3, became a little bit smaller than it otherwise would have been. And then the XL didn't have to stretch all the way to people who are 6'6" anymore. So it kind of got to be targeted more tightly towards the 6'1", 6'3" range. And then the XL, the size 5 really got to stretch out to actually fit people who are up to 6'6", which we've never made a bike that large before.
Well, we ran out of time at Whistler Bike Park, but we wanted to get these bikes tested on some jumps. So we came back to Bellingham, Washington, to Mohawk Trail here on Galbraith Mountain, and I'm gonna pass them off to Logan, who's a bit more fun to watch on jumps than I think I am. And I really enjoy watching him on jumps. So let's see what Logan thinks about the HD6 versus the Ripmo versus his new Specialized demo.
This is all that I want to ride. No, I'm just kidding. I actually am pretty excited to compare these. Maybe not as much the downhill bike to the HD6, but more so the Ripmo to the HD6, because I've ridden many Ripmos. I've ridden them quite a lot in my time. And while I love the bike, I wouldn't say that its strong suit is high-speed jumps. And so I'm quite curious to compare a similar suspension design, just a DW link, but just different geo overall, different bike. And so I'm just, quite curious to see how they differ.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch you boost that thing behind us.
We'll see.
Let's do it.
I've never really ridden a downhill bike. I'm noticing these lips are a little bit steep for this thing. They're like shorter lips. Maybe a little bit more pedaling than I usually have to do. Oh yeah! Oh, that's way better. Woo! Feels good though. It feels good to ride a big bike here. Actually, one big thing, that turn down there. I remember on my other bikes, it kind of like trail bikes, shorter travel bikes, kind of feels scary because you're just going like Mach 10, like. But this, I honestly didn't even notice. I was like, oh, so easy. I'm finding on the jump before this one that if I don't pedal, I'm casing. So I kind of gotta like pump this one roller, and then I have to pedal to make it, which I've noticed on a couple bikes that I have to do that. Some bikes, like usually shorter travel bikes, like my Druid, a Smuggler, or my Tall Boy, I don't have to pedal because you can more efficiently pump the backside of that pump, and rather than the bike soaking up a lot of it and losing speed. So I am actually genuinely quite curious to see if on the HD6, if that's something I have to do or not. Definitely feels smaller than my DH bike, a lot more maneuverable. I can feel the weight difference a lot. Don't have to do as much pedaling, keep up the proper amount of speed. Oh yeah, overjumped that one by a good bit. Oh wow, that jump in particular is often kind of hard to make, and then really quite easy. Oh yeah, I keep feeling like after doing this on the DH bike that I'm gonna have to pedal, but it's not being the case, even with very similar travel numbers. Oh yeah, feels great. It feels really good. Very composed. Definitely didn't have to pedal as much as I did on my demo. Feels really good on the takeoffs. I noticed it flowing through way less than the DH bike. Felt better on the smaller, less fast jumps on these. I was pretty confident going into them. I did feel like a little bit less, like a tiny bit less stable on that really fast left-hand turn, but nothing huge. Like, I don't think I would be bummed out or even notice. The only reason I kind of notice now is because I'm doing them back to back. Hey!
Good question.
Yes.
Have you noticed the wheels being different sizes.
Not one bit. Not a thing that I noticed at all.
What's next, Logan?
Ripmo. This honestly feels quite a lot faster without trying, even compared to the HD6. It's just like, I think it could be the big wheels, some of it the suspension. I am feeling the suspension flow through a lot more. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I overjumped that by a long ways. On takeoffs, I am feeling this kind of blow through its suspension a bit more than I would like. It's not bad. I did prefer the HD6, but this one is probably faster. If that's something you want to get the KOM on your local flow trail, jump trail. I'm having to try less hard to make the jumps. More.
Here, let me get this kid.
Okay. Good pump.
I think he went higher than you, Logan.
Did he? So, something I've noticed between these three bikes, three, very different categories of bike on jumps like this, is that they can all do them fine. Like, they can all do it no problem. But on the downhill bike, I found myself wanting to keep doing it all day long. Like, it made me feel like so pumped. Like, as soon as I do one run, I'm like, I have to do that again. Like, it feels so good, so fun, so safe, honestly. HD6, similar feeling. It wasn't sketchy or anything, but a little bit less of like, oh, like I need more of that. And then hopping on this thing, sure, like you can see that it does it fine, but it doesn't feel as confident. And I could do it again and I would have fun. I'm having fun, but it didn't have me craving for more of this kind of thing, the way that, the other two did, especially the downhill bike.
Yesterday, Logan and I took the new Ibis HD6 to Whistler Bike Park along with his specialized demo downhill bike to answer the question of whether the HD6 can replace a dedicated downhill bike as a one-bike quiver. Is it significantly less fun than something that's purpose-built for that job? Now, after talking about it last night, we decided that when a downhill bike costs between $4,000 and say $10,000, that's average $5,000 expenditure, this bike is not significantly less fun. There's not a $5,000 difference in how much fun you're having. In fact, it's far less than that. It's a very small difference in how much fun you're having. So we think that if you're not in a position to own a full-on downhill bike, this is a perfect tool for the job. Today, we're gonna look at the flip side of that and see whether the HD6 can replace a trail bike as your everyday rider. To do so, we're gonna look at the Ripmo AF, or very similar to the Carbon Ripmo, a beloved bike that's been around for a while now and many people know and love. It's a 150, 160 29er that excels on riding everyday trail. In fact, the Ibis race team has been racing it as their enduro bike for many years now. But there are some real differences against the HD6, so we want to see whether those differences, for example, much more travel on this bike, a mullet setup, and just generally beefier components, beefier tires, is going to detract from the amount of fun you're having when you're out on an everyday ride. Got one. The Ripmo. I just did this little G out into kind of trail gap behind me. I was trying to get the triple, not really succeeding. Now, Ripmos have sort of been a great trail bike. They were essentially designed to be a trail bike, not an enduro bike. And as such, people have found over time that for more aggressive riding, like the enduro team, for example, have found that it has lacked the progressivity in the suspension rate that they wanted. So they're putting a lot of volume reducers in there to keep the bike from bottoming out. On this bike, which is one of the shop's demos, I definitely found that. Like, I'm running 30% sag, which is sort of what it's designed around. And I immediately am like pushing through the travel on that trail gap that I'm casing really badly, so that's part of it. But on a bike like this, which there was a lot of feedback from the enduro team, they've really upped how progressive the suspension rate is. In regards to like taking a bike to the downhill bike park, this would suit very well. This, I would be pretty hesitant to like really get after it at the bike park. If I was spending a lot of time at the bike park, might not choose the Ripmo just because it's designed for like more undulating trail where you're not like smashing stuff really hard all the time. And if you do that, you have to sort of compromise a little bit on the suspension by running a bunch of volume reducers, running less sag. It is possible, but the Ripmo is again designed more as a trail bike versus the HD6, which again, specifically an enduro race bike. I actually just, never thought I'd see the day, but I actually just sold my downhill bike that I've had for a lot of years. My favorite bike. I don't ride it enough anymore, and I've been looking for something to replace it and my trail bike. And the HD6 was announced to us, and I said, you know, I bet that's the bike. And this trip, this little video and excursion and experiment with Logan, I think has proved that to me anyways. After riding this bit of trail behind me, I was reminded that there's a reason the Ripmo has been such a popular bike since it came out and into the Ripmo AF. It's just an exceptionally fun trail bike. For a trail like this where it's just undulating, you're pumping, there's not like sharp rocks everywhere, like really techie stuff, you know, trail that ranges from Colorado out to Washington, anywhere in the country. It's just really, really fun. The big 29-inch wheels roll super fast. The travel that I said above, you know, you can push through the travel more easily, but that's because it's really supple and it feels really good. It's like usable, good travel on most trail. And it pumps really well too. It just feels fast. It's a bike that, as evidenced by the number of people that own them, is just really popular because it's really, really fun. I think for me, where I'm at right now, it's gonna do the trick just swimmingly. Spending the day in Whistler Bike Park yesterday, I think really showcased that to me. It's a pretty sick bike. Let's talk about climbing. If you're gonna be buying this bike, the HD6, as your everyday do-it-all bike, that's a really important thing to consider, especially if you're replacing something like the Ripmo, which is really good at climbing. The geometry on this bike versus the Ripmo is very similar. They have the same length chainstays. The wheelbase is only a centimeter or so longer, at least on the medium. I'm 5'10", riding mediums on both bikes. So you get a little slacker front end, 64 degrees versus I think 65. Wheelbase is a bit longer, a centimeter longer for this bike. Reach, quite similar. The effective top tube on this bike is actually about a centimeter longer because the seat tube is 1 degree slacker. But all in all, you're getting a very nice upright position. On fire roads, they feel identical. I left both the climb switches open, but with the anti-squat, anti-rise, all the kinematics that they've worked out on these bikes, they're very efficient climbers, especially on something like a fire road. Now, on a technical single track climb like what we have here, I do still feel like a full 29-inch wheel setup like we have on the Ripmo does keep momentum. It gets you through like bumpy stuff a little smooth, allows you to keep your momentum better. However, a smaller wheel allows you to get back up to speed and put down the power again if you get bogged down in something. All in all, I'd say that kind of adds up to being a wash. Now, as far as the suspension staying active under pedaling, so that's allowing the wheels to move and maintain traction on the ground as you go over these bumps. Again, I think they're both quite good. The Ripmo, because of that nice supple suspension, it will maybe move over and track the ground maybe a little bit better than I'm discerning, but all in all, I would call it a wash and say that if climbing is something that is part of your everyday riding, either bike will do the trick. Now, obviously, if all you like to do is climb and hammer out miles, you're not really gonna be looking at this bike in the first place. So we can sort of discount that.
Okay, Dan, we just spent 3 hours working our way down a half a mile bit of trail.
True.
And if I was to offer you the option to go shuttle that trail, which of these two bikes would you be choosing?
I would be choosing the HD6. That was a fairly, steep, aggressive trail, and if we're shuttling it, definitely this. Even if we're pedaling it, honestly, the differences in pedaling were so insignificant, and the benefits that I got from the extra travel on this bike and just sort of the more, aggressive geometry, I felt like I was able to go faster and more confidently pull for stuff that I felt less comfortable pulling on the Ripmo.
Well, do you want to shuttle?
Yeah, we could do a quick shuttle run. This trail is really cool. That stuff is my favorite.